no, I'm not a hockey expert.
Rockford's GM, Mark Bernard, is on the bench. Why is Mark Bernard on the bench?
As many of you know, I was an enforcer for the Rockford IceHogs.
Stand proud, Rockford! You have a hockey champion!
Hi, IceHogs fans, and welcome into episode 13 of Hog Talk. Our guest on this episode of the official podcast of the Rockford IceHogs is Andrew Smith. He's the voice of the Indy Fuel in the ECHL, of course, the Fuel, the ECHL affiliate of the Rockford IceHogs. We've had several players spend time with the Fuel this season, developing, getting some more touches on the puck, just like how players come down from the Blackhawks to spend time in Rockford. So a very close relationship between Indy and with Rockford so far this season. Andy fills us in on how some of the guys have been faring down at the AA level of professional hockey. Me and Andy have been catching up every couple of weeks recently, and we decided to include this last conversation as our interview for episode number 13 of Hog Talk. The IceHogs are coming off of another big win. Rockford has won 4 in a row. Their most recent was a 2-1 shootout victory over the Milwaukee Admirals on Tuesday night right here at the BMO Center. And by virtue of picking up those 2 points against Milwaukee, Rockford only needed 1, but they got the 2, and in doing so, the Hogs clinched their ticket to the 2024 Calder Cup playoffs. Rockford is dancing in the postseason for the 3rd consecutive year. Now, if you remember back to this time last year, we still did not know Rockford's fate when it came to where things were going to fall in the playoff picture. We went all the way to Game 72 before we had finally had a confirmation on Rockford's postseason bid. Of course, that's different this year. The Hogs clinch a postseason spot with 9 games left in the regular season. And the Hogs aren't just looking to make the playoffs. They're looking for home ice advantage in that first round. Currently, Rockford sitting back in 3rd place, 3 points behind the 2nd place Grand Rapids Griffins, who the Hogs play twice this weekend. Once in GR at Van Andel Arena, and then once, of course, here at the BMO Center for our 3rd and final local art series hat giveaway. If you're a season ticket holder, remember to lock into your playoff plans by that April 17th deadline. We've had a lot of people opting into those playoff plans already. If you have not, check your emails from Ryan, Tara, or Kevin. They will have already reached out to you, so make sure you go back and find one of those emails and opt in to the playoff plan, because this Hogs team is poised to make potentially a deep run. My message to IceHogs Nation would be to not be complacent with the way this team has been playing. It's easy to let winning get boring, and this team's been doing a lot of winning, but don't be complacent, be excited. Rockford has now won 14 of its last 16 games. That's the first time ever that an IceHogs AHL team has accomplished that feat, winning 14 of 16. The Hogs are rolling. Of course, they had that 7-game win streak. They've sprinkled in a couple losses, but they have won 4 in a row, including a win against the Central Division leading Milwaukee Admirals most recently. The Hogs have beaten the Admirals twice in the last couple of games, and Rockford and Milwaukee will eventually meet 3 more times over the course of the end of the season here. So we'll be seeing that navy blue and sky blue a whole lot more over the next couple of weeks of April. But this team is rolling right now. A big reason why Rem Pitlick, we'll touch on him more in just a moment. But you think back to last year, and I mentioned that Rockford's in a better situation now than they were last season. But look at personnel-wise where this team is as well. You return 3 of your leading scorers from last year. I'm talking about David Gust, Brett Sini, and Luke Philp. Those 3 are on your roster and playing well with the IceHogs right now. You also had guys like Lucas Reichel and Rocco Grimaldi with the IceHogs last season that are not with the team this year, obviously, or at least right now. Reichel's up with the Blackhawks, Grimaldi with the Chicago Wolves. But instead, look at who you have kind of in their place filling in that offensive void. Rem Pitlick, who's been more than a point-a-game player since he's come down from the Blackhawks. Zach Sanford, who was one of the heroes in the shootout last Wednesday and on this past Tuesday's game against Milwaukee. Colton Dock, who's been an impressive rookie. Ethan Del Mastro, who leads your team in scoring from the blue line. Cole Gutman, who, remember, was shut down with a shoulder injury last season, and he's been better than a point-a-game player with the Hawks. He was just named the AHL Player of the Month. Jackson Cates, a more versatile two-way centerman who you can put out there in any situation. And then you're getting an improved, at least from a production standpoint, Mike Hardman and Michael Tepley. Hardman getting back to his form that we saw out of him in his rookie year. Last year, he was a little snake-bitten offensively. This season, he already has 19 goals, tying his total that he posted a couple of years back. And Michael Tepley is skating hard on that line with Hardman and Sanford. That's three big bodies that are making it hard for teams to escape their own zone. So you lose guys like Reichel and Grimaldi from your lineup from last year to this year, but you replace them with all those guys that I mentioned, and this team just looks a lot different and has a lot more offensive punch than the Rockford group that we saw last year. The IceHogs are now averaging over 3 goals per game. That's something they haven't done since the beginning of the season. And a big part of that has been due to Rem Pitlick. He came down to the IceHogs in mid-February from the Blackhawks. Of course, the Hawks acquired him in a trade from the Pittsburgh Penguins. When Rem Pitlick is in the lineup for Rockford, the Hogs are 15-4-0. They average about a goal more per game with Rem Pitlick in the lineup than they do without Rem Pitlick in the lineup. So you have him on that line with Gutman and with Cini as well. And then you have Gutman, the Player of the Month, just the 4th ever IceHog to win AHL Player of the Month honors, and he's the first to do so since Michael Layton captured the award back in 2015. So some big-time offensive contributors. Gutman was shut down last year. He's making an impact this year. Rem Pitlick has been dominant with the IceHogs, and then don't forget about the team's leading scorer, Brett Cini, on that line as well. Gutman, by the way, riding a 9-game point streak into this Friday's tilt at Van Andel Arena against Grand Rapids. We did have some fans write in questions earlier this week, so I want to get to them here on this latest episode of Hog Talk. But Mark in Belvedere writes in, just what are the chances that Rockford is the 2 seed, and what does that mean for this team moving forward? It's a good question, Mark, but chances that the Hogs capture that 2 seed, can't put a number on it right now, but both Rockford and Grand Rapids, so that's the 3rd seed and 2 seed currently respectively, they both have 9 games remaining in the regular season. Rockford and GR have 3 more games against one another, including the 2 this weekend. So these pair of games this weekend for the IceHogs and Griffins are 2 huge contests, really, and could swing this decision one way or another. My best way of putting it is that the IceHogs have to stay at least within 3 points of Grand Rapids after this weekend. So if you pull even with GR through this weekend, you're still fine with 7 games to go in the regular campaign. If the IceHogs win 1 in regulation and GR wins 1 in regulation, you still have a puncher's chance to capture that 2 seed. Now, if the Griffins pull out to a 4-point lead of Rockford, that's going to be really hard to make up in a 7-game window. And part of that is because Grand Rapids has the tiebreaker being regulation wins. And so even if Rockford and GR end up with the exact same amount of points at the end of the regular season, Grand Rapids would get the 2, Rockford would get the 3 by virtue of that regulation win tiebreaker. So you don't have to, pick up 4 points and hold Grand Rapids to 0 on this weekend. The IceHogs could potentially take the 2 spot here this weekend, but you don't have to eventually move up into that second line. And I think that 2 seed could make a big impact in that first playoff series if indeed we do have a Rockford Grand Rapids matchup, which it's looking more and more like we're going to have. We're not sure of that yet, but we're starting to feel like that's the way that things are shifting. This is likely going to be a 2-2-1 series. Of course, nothing is set in certain with dates or anything like that, but between Rockford and Grand Rapids, it will be a best of 5 in the division semifinal round. And so with that being said, it'll likely be the home team getting the first 2 at home, and then you'll go 2 to the away team, and then that game 5, if necessary, will be at the higher seeds place as well. One thing to keep in note for the division semifinal round, that's not the play-in round. Remember, there's the play-in round, then there's the division semifinals, then division finals, conference finals, Calder Cup finals. That division semifinal round, the best of 5 series, you have really kind of an extra week to play that series, so that helps out with building availability a little bit, whereas that play-in round, you have to fit that into essentially a week span, that best of 3 series. but we could have the 4 and 5 seed playing each other in that best of 3 series while the 2-3 series is going on at the same time. So even though the 2-3 series is really around later, that could be happening at the same time as the 4-5 series. It's just that the 4-5 matchup with the 1 seed later in the division semifinals, that series gets bunched up a little bit compared to the 2-3 matchup, which has essentially an extra week to play itself out. That's a long-winded way of saying that whoever's in that 2-3 window could have a little bit of extra rest and could have a little bit more time in between games than the 1 seed, who will have some more rest potentially on the front end, but might have to play more games in consecutive order once they do start the postseason against the winner of that 4-5 matchup. That was a lot to try and illustrate without any graphics or any visual aids. So hopefully you were able to follow all of that. But long story short, Rockford's looking good, and they'll be looking even better if they can claim home ice advantage in the 2-3 matchup against Grand Rapids. We had another question come in actually from Michael in McChesney Park. Michael asks, what Chicago players will be coming down for the postseason? Now, Michael, you asked who will be coming down. Can't answer that. That's up to management. Who can come down, that's Lukas Reichel and Wyatt Kaiser, 2 players who were on Rockford's roster at the time of the NHL trade deadline. They are eligible for the AHL postseason. The Blackhawks still could call a couple guys up towards the end of the year and not quite hit their 4 emergency call-ups that they're allowed after the NHL trade deadline. So don't know if we'll see that. But we could see Wyatt Kaiser and Lukas Reichel come down for the AHL playoffs. Those would be the 2 names to look out for. Reichel had a goal and an assist a couple games back against the Philadelphia Flyers. Kaiser's been looking really good on the back end, and there were times when he was Rockford's best player during his time here in the AHL. So those would be 2 big additions to Rockford's back end. One subtraction on the back end for the Hogs recently. It was announced that Nolan Allen will be out 3 to 4 weeks with a lower body injury. So Rockford's missing one of its rookie staples on the blue line. That means we're going to see more of Austin Strand and more of Josh Healy as well. Those 2 have been in the lineup the last couple games with no Nolan Allen, and then also with Kaiser up in the National Hockey League. I also don't think it's too crazy to say that we could see an Andrew Parrott or a Josh Maniscalco. Maniscalco currently up here in the AHL, but both of those guys have played with Rockford at different times throughout the year, and both are accustomed to the systems and should be able theoretically to plug right in. Of course, Healy is the elder of those defensemen, and so he's got a little bit more experience when it comes to knowing what's coming down the stretch here with playoff hockey on the horizon. But also wouldn't be surprised to see Rockford kind of use some more of its depth and get guys some playing time here with a playoff spot already clinched, and that way you can keep some other guys fresh for the postseason as well. But without any further haste, let's get to Andrew Smith and our chat with him here on episode 13 of Hog Talk. Great to talk with Andy. The Indy Fuel kind of in a similar spot to where Rockford is in terms of the postseason picture. When me and Andy were chatting, Indy was in second in their division. First place, probably not in the realm of possibility, but the Fuel have been playing some good hockey here down the stretch. Thanks to guys like Kyle Maximovich and Ross McDougall, among others. Cam Hillis, who we saw in Rockford here last year, he's on an ECHL deal with the Fuel, but he's Indy's leading scorer currently. So a lot of familiar names if you've been following the IceHogs closely. A lot of familiar names coming up in this chat, but great to check in with Andy to see how the Fuel are doing and to see how players are ripening and developing at the AA level here in North America. So here's our chat with the voice of the Indy Fuel, Andrew Smith.
Well, it's the second time this season that we've had a conversation with Andrew Smith, the voice of the Indy Fuel. And Andrew, thanks for jumping on. It looks like both of our teams, as we record this at the start of April, have been trending upwards for a while now. Definitely want to hear about how the Fuel have been doing and how some of those guys that we've seen in Rockford have been doing with the Fuel as well. But just kind of give us a state of the union, if you will. These last couple of weeks seem to have been treating you guys pretty well, just like they've treated us.
Yeah, the Fuel right now in second place in the Central Division in the ECHL, and very much like the National Hockey League, used to be back in the 80s, top 4 in each division make the postseason. And right now, Indy's magic number to clinch is 6 points with 5 games to go. So it's a pretty good spot for the Fuel that will likely put the Fuel in the playoffs for the second time in a row. And it'll be the first time in franchise history they will have made the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. So that's pretty exciting. It's certainly things are going very well in Indy right now. And it's a team that was in last place at Thanksgiving that really caught fire in December and into January. And that's continued as we hit the latter part of the season. And right now, the Fuel have a legitimate chance of finishing second in the division. Obviously, they're currently there right now, and they've got a 5-point lead over third place Wheeling and are 6 points ahead of fourth place Kalamazoo at the moment. And so they've got a really good shot at potentially having home ice advantage for the first time in the 10-year franchise history as well. So a good way to potentially close out our final season at the historic Indiana Farmers Coliseum, and a really good momentum for the Fuel as they build momentum going into the postseason here, especially with a lot of division games late in the year, and they've been racking up the wins. They've won 5 of the last 7 coming into these last 5 games of the regular season. And Mike, it looks like the Hogs are doing really well as well, and also trending upward as we hit the home stretch of the year.
Yeah. The Hogs have won 13 of 15, and it's all green lights for Rockford right now. We have a lot of guys that have come down from the Blackhawks. And of course, the Blackhawks are not looking at a playoff spot, so that's benefited us at the AHL level. And I know we've been sending guys periodically down to Indy to get some ice time, because to be quite honest, we have really good players that are healthy scratches every night, just based on personnel and how many bodies we have. I think by my last count, we have 19 NHL contracted players on our roster right now, which is really something. And usually we have about 16 or 17 of those guys in a lineup every night. So there's just not a lot of room for some of the depth pieces that have been very important to Rockford over the course of the season. Guys like Andrew Parrott and Josh Maniscalco. Starting with those two specifically, I know you got a chance to see them in a limited sense the last couple of weeks, but when they got down, did they look like they were ready to get back to action instead of kind of sitting on the shelf?
Oh, without a doubt. Maniscalco, we saw him the last 2 years in Wheeling. When he is in the ECHL, he's an elite defenseman at that level, and he drives so much offense from the blue line. And the thing that really impresses me about Maniscalco is every breakout pass is right to the tape. And so because of that, you're able to make plays coming out of your own zone and build speed through the neutral zone. And the one thing Duncan Dalmeo loves to do is he loves his team to play with a lot of speed and a lot of pace. And so Maniscalco driving that from the back end with his really good offensive ability, obviously driving offense from the point, but also making those breakout passes and retrieving pucks, has been really good when he's been here. And when he was with Indy in January, led one of the craziest comebacks I've ever seen. They were down 7-2 in Wheeling in the third period, and he had 4 points in the 6-goal comeback in an outburst in the third period. I asked him when he was with us last week if he'd ever been a part of a game like that. He said no. That was just a unique contest, and for him it was pretty special, taking place in a building where he had played the last couple of years. And Andrew Parrott's a different type of player, more of a stay-at-home guy who can contribute on the offensive end when needed, but he has just continued to grow and grow. Of course, last year spent most of the year in the ECHL. This year he spent most of the year in the American League and has come down to Indy and has really contributed when he has been with the Fuel, and solidifies what's already a really good defensive core. And one thing when he's there, and you throw in Matt Cairns and Chris Cameron, who are two really elite defensemen on ECHL contracts. You add in a DJ King, who's, of course, an IceHogs contracted player, and a number of other guys as well. Victor Hadfield's basically a one-man breakout with his speed. And Santino Centerame is a plus player, another guy on an ECHL contract. The goalies aren't seeing a lot of pucks, and when they do, they're able to see the puck And because of that, Mitchell Weeks and Zach Driscoll have had really good years on the back end. And that's been a big reason for the Fuel's success. But when an Andrew Parrott is in Indy, or a Josh Maniscalco is in Indy, and they bring much different skill sets, but they really, really bolster this team because you're essentially adding an elite player at the ECHL level, and they've been ready to go whenever they've been in the lineup, which it looks like they haven't missed a beat. I know that it's really difficult for them to get playing time because the IceHogs are so deep right now, but they look like guys that have been playing every night when they've been in Indy.
Well, that's good to hear that they're jumping right back in, because you look at from an IceHogs perspective, and when we get a Wyatt Kaiser back down from the Blackhawks, or since Rem Pitlick has come into the lineup, it just has this effect, as I'm sure you've seen, where it just knocks everybody down in the lineup. Then you've got better matchups all the way across the board. One guy too, I wanted to ask, Ross McDougall down there. I know he's put up some points on the blue line. We've seen him a little bit in Rockford, not so much the last a couple of months, but he was a guy who was called upon here with the IceHogs. We saw some offensive upside here in his game. It looked like he maybe still needed some ripening, just kind of all around getting used to the pro side. But wanted to kind of inquire as to his status as of late, and how he's looked over the course of the year.
Well, he is another guy that, from where he was at this time last year, where he was just getting his feet wet in the pro game and then had to take on a difficult task facing an absolutely loaded Toledo team in the playoffs, to now he is a plus player. He's plus 11 on the year. He's very good at driving offense from the blue line. And again, this Fuel team's got a lot of really good stay-at-home guys. So having a mobile defenseman who is really good at retrieving pucks and making the breakout pass, and also quarterbacking the power play if need be. And the one thing Duncan Del Mayo has done is his number one unit is 5 forwards. And Brian Lemos, who's a veteran, quarterbacks that unit, but often Ross McDougall quarterbacks the second unit. And really, Duncan sees them as a 1A and a 1B more than a first and a second unit. He said, I'll put whichever unit is most fresh out there, because he's got a lot of trust in both of them. But he's just come into his own. And the one thing I've noticed as the year has gone on, and especially from last year, where again, he was just getting his feet wet as a pro, is he is just so much more comfortable in his own end and is so much stronger at the details of the defensive zone. And because of that, that has made him a really good all-around defenseman. I think he's going to be a guy that is probably going to be a mainstay in the IceHogs lineup in a year, and somebody who is just going to continue to work his way up the ladder in minor pro hockey, and hopefully eventually beyond that.
Well, you mentioned making life easier for the goaltenders. We had Mitchell Weeks called up here as a third goaltender essentially recently. Drew Comesso got taken out of a game. He appears to be fine. And so Rockford still has Comesso and Stauber available, coming down the stretch. But we had Cam Gray up here as well. And Weeks has looked good so far with you guys. But it looked like Cam Gray, who was really called up to here really just for depth and practice and things like that, wasn't really expected to play as much. It looked like he had a pretty good game stop, and I think it was 38-40, was it? And then eventually lost in the shootout. But it's good to see him, giving you guys some good minutes in goal and providing another option.
Yeah, without a doubt. And he's a guy who doesn't get a whole lot of minutes. That was his first game since February 3rd. And so getting the opportunity for him to get the call up and work with the goaltending coach and just see AHL shooters in practice, I think was really good for him. And it showed on Saturday night. Again, your first game action in 7 weeks, and you're in Toledo against the number one offense in the league with probably the best line in the league, led by Brandon Hawkins, who's the ECHL's leading scorer, who I still have no idea how he's not in the American Hockey League. He's a guy with an NHL shot that is just an incredible player at our level. But he came in and was just fantastic. 38 saves in his first game back. And Cam Gray's a guy who was a couple of years ago led Adrian College to a national championship, was 23-0 with them, and I think has just been needing his shot. And as you know, the learning curve for goaltenders is a little bit longer. It takes a little bit more time for guys to develop, and people who may struggle their rookie year find their footing their second year and really become solid starters in their third or fourth year. And that seems to be the arc Cam Gray is going on. But it was great to see him earn the call up, get a little bit of work in practice or as a backup with the IceHogs for those few days. And then that obviously prepared him very well for the game Saturday night, where he was called upon because, as you mentioned, Mitchell Weeks was with the Hogs and Zach Driscoll's wife was having a baby. So he was called upon to step in and just did a fantastic job earning a critical standings point for Indy, because a lot of teams don't go into Toledo and pick up points. They've already clinched the division title. They're in the mix for the number one overall seed in the ECHL playoffs coming up. So that was a big win, or not win, but a big point and a really good game for him. And he faced 18 shots in the third period alone in that game, and was able to stop 16 of them and give his team a chance to win, which is all you can ask for. So, we look at that. And another guy who is on the certainly on an AHL contract that I think we're going to see a little bit more in Rockford coming up is Kyle Maximovich. He's got 56 points in 63 games, leads the Fuel with 24 goals, has really been surging of late. He's got a 4-game scoring streak coming into this week. Another rookie who got his feet wet last year, right at the end of the season, out of the University of Prince Edward Island, and he has just been somebody who is driving that top line. He's on one wing, Colin Bielik's on the other, and even though he's had some injury issues, he's got 20 goals in 49 games. And then Cam Hillis in the middle, when they've been together, and they haven't been much because either Bielik or Hillis has either been injured or in the AHL for most of the last month. One of those two guys seems to have been. That trio hasn't really been together, but when they have been, they're absolutely dynamite. And Cam Hillis is, you've seen a little bit over the last couple of years. He's an outstanding playmaker. And then you've got a couple of finishers on either wing. They're 20-goal scorers, and Hilly's going to end up with 20 as well. He's got 18 goals right now in 54 games. But that's as good of a top line as you'll see right now. And I think Maximovich is another guy whose offensive skill is really solid. Then Colin Bielik on the right side of that line, he's just a solid 3-zone player. Kills penalties, does everything you ask him to do in the defensive zone, and then he can chip in with 20 goals on the offensive end, and has been really good on the power play, where he's the Fuel's leading goal scorer with the man advantage. So there's a lot of really good talent on AHL contracts, guys that are certainly in the IceHogs fray that have really been contributing big for the Indy Fuel this season, and a big reason for their success so far.
What I'm interested with is looking at guys like McDougall and Maximovich, with McDougall coming out of Division III level. Is that right, Andy? Am I getting that right?
He's out of Canadian College, yeah. Canadian College, yeah.
And but you have guys coming out of these unorthodox feeder systems into the professional ranks, I guess you could say. They're not coming from junior A or high end Division I. They're coming from a lower level league, I guess you could say. That obviously there's still good players to be found there. Case in point with those two guys, but I would imagine there's just more of a learning curve there. And you mentioned it with goalies, a wider learning curve that might take several more years. But with McDougall and Maximovich, they seem to be rounding that off in their first full pro years, respectively. Is that kind of the perspective that you have seen and witnessed from those two as they've gone along and as they've found their footing, they've discovered that they've belonged at this level?
Oh, they have more than discovered they belonged. And yeah, I think last year especially was just getting used to the pro game, because in the Canadian College ranks, you've got a lot of former major junior players, but you play a short season. It's usually about 25, 30 games. And it's somewhere in between the Division I level of NCAA and, say, Division III. And so there is a little bit of a steeper curve once you get to the pros, but you can really see it. I think that's one area where Duncan Dalmeo is really good. The details in their game are just growing, and as they take care of those, they can really flourish because they can allow their skill to show, winning pucks along the walls, retrieving pucks, winning board battles, and taking care of the little things in your defensive zone, and just dealing with the physicality of the pro game, because it's much different than certainly the Division I level, but much more so the Canadian college game or Division III. And so you see a lot of these guys, they're a little bit older because they're 24, 25 years old as rookies, but they're physically ready to step in. It's just a matter of getting ready to get acclimated to the pro game. And they're guys that their games have just grown leaps and bounds. And you could see the flashes of skill they had last year, but now as their game has become more well-rounded, they have become major contributors in the ECHL, and I would anticipate they'll be big contributors in the AHL going forward.
Let's look at the playoff scope of things. You mentioned Toledo being out ahead of your division. The rest of the division looks like it's all pretty tight. And so where you guys are, you said magic number was 6. Do you anticipate just kind of a 6-7 game series with no matter who you're playing against, if you guys are in that 2-3 window in the division?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's been a mad scramble between 4 teams for 3 spots really since November, and they haven't been separated by more than about 4 or 5 points in that 4-team grouping for what feels like 3 months now. And Indy building a little bit of a cushion here these last couple of weeks has been unusual because nobody's really been able to build one. And what's been interesting is, from the Fuel's perspective, Wheeling's in 3rd place. That's a team the Fuel largely dominated this season. Kalamazoo's in 4th place, and up until Indy won the last 2 meetings, the K-Wings were 7-4 against Indy to start the year, and they've got 1 more game left, so the Fuel have an opportunity to equalize the season series. Fort Wayne is a team the Fuel have had the upper hand against. They're in 5th place right now. They're a bit of a dangerous team. They made a couple of deadline moves to pick up Zach Andrusiak, who's one of the leading scorers in the league, so they're going to be a little bit dangerous. They're another team. They're an Edmonton Oilers affiliate. They're getting a lot of help from the AHL. Most of their team is players on Bakersfield contracts, whereas Kalamazoo and Wheeling, mostly ECHL contracted guys, a little bit, in Kalamazoo's case, a little bit older team. And in Wheeling's case, they have been absolutely decimated by call-ups. And it's been kind of the opposite of where the Blackhawks and IceHogs and Fuel organization are, where there's so much depth, and the Hawks really want guys to get playoff experience. So they're loading up the IceHogs, and that's trickling down to Indy. Pittsburgh's fire sale at the deadline led to guys getting called up from Wilkes-Barre Scranton up to Pittsburgh, which has led to Wheeling's roster being absolutely decimated. So they have, as they come to Indy on Wednesday night, it looks like in their lineup, they will probably have 6 or 7 players that were recently signed from the college ranks just to fill the roster. So, and that's the reality in the ECHL. We joke about it being the ever-changing hockey league, and I know you were in the league for a couple of years in Atlanta, that your success often is dictated by what's happening around you, what's happening in your organization. If you have a lot of guys called up, or if you have a bunch of injuries, that could set you onto a bad patch for a couple of weeks. And as tight as things are in the Fuels division right now, that could mean the difference between home ice and not being in the playoffs. But whomever it is, whether it's Fort Wayne, Wheeling, Kalamazoo, I'd expect an absolute dynamite series because the teams are all so closely matched right now. And I would anticipate as well Wheeling's going to get its guys back once the playoffs happen, because obviously the Penguins aren't going to make it. So they'll send their guys back down to Wilkes-Barre Scranton, who will lead to the domino effect. And we'll see what happens with the other teams. But everybody seems to be so closely matched right now that it should be a really, really fun playoff. And looks like the same in the American Hockey League. The IceHogs look like they're in a good position to get a bye in the first round and avoid that best of three playoff series in the first round. And again, things look really, really tight in the Hogs division, and they should be well poised to have some success in the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, we've been looking good in the regular season, kind of like what you're talking about with Wheeling. That's happening to kind of in reverse to teams like, Milwaukee, with Nashville being in the postseason picture all of a sudden in the NHL, and they're calling guys up from the Milwaukee Admirals, who currently lead our division, and Grand Rapids is being pillaged by Detroit at times here. So the Hogs are trending positively, while other teams are trending down here towards the end of the year. Obviously, as we know, in the postseason, you kind of got to throw all that out the window. But Rockford has a legit chance to take that 2 seed away from Grand Rapids and make a move on them and jump ahead and potentially take home ice in that 2-3 series. And like you said, avoid the play-in round for the first time in the last several years. So that would be lovely. But we only have like a minute or so here left, but I just kind of wanted to quickly ask you what the vibe was around the Fuel with this team winning, and also with the stadium construction and everything. Just what's the excitement level around the organization and around the hockey community in Indiana and in Fishers on that north side?
Well, the Fuel are going to set a franchise record for attendance. We're nearly 5,000 a game in a 6,400 seat building, which is fantastic. So you can see the vibe has been very good. The crowd support has been fantastic, and it's building momentum going into the new building in Fishers. It's going to open in December with the opening of the 11th Indy Fuel season. But the team's success has certainly built into that. And every time I talk to players, whether it's a guy like a Maniscalco or an Andrew Parrott or a Cale Howarth who comes down from Rockford, or if it's somebody who's been around for a while, like a Seamus Malone, who's the team captain, they all say the one thing I love about this team is how tight the room is, how much the guys really love each other. And I think because of that shows on the ice, because they really, really want to play for each other. And when players come down from Rockford, they want to be there. And you can sometimes have guys that they take it as a demotion. A lot of guys coming from the IceHogs take it as an opportunity, and they fit in seamlessly into the room, and they want to contribute to winning, and they've been a part of it. And it's been a lot of fun to see this team kind of come together and different players stepping up different nights. And as a result, it's led to a lot of success, and that's happening on the ice. It's happening off the ice. And certainly with the new arena coming, that's generated a lot of buzz as well. And it's been driving by your old hometown and seeing the building go up, and the walls are up now and the roof is on, and it's looking like a place that's going to be hosting hockey games in the very near future. And it's going to be just an absolute state-of-the-art arena that is going to be a great, great place to host the next generation of hockey in Central Indiana.
Great to chat with Andrew Smith. We certainly wish the Indy Fuel the best of luck as they pursue the Kelly Cup. But it's fun for me to watch the development of this new stadium going in Fishers, Indiana. That's my hometown. When I was growing up in Fishers, it was a much smaller town than what it has become. It's now a sprawling suburb that has lots of attractive amenities for young hockey players, great shops and restaurants and bars around where that new stadium is going in. So it's been fun for me to keep track of all of that. They have the solar eclipse coming through, I believe, on Monday. So talking with Andy a little bit before, it sounds like they're getting ready to embrace the path of totality or whatever they're calling the path that the eclipse is coming through. But it should be rolling right through central Indiana where the Fuel play. And so we hope they have their eclipse sunglasses on for that on Monday. They're enjoying that. And, of course, a playoff push just like the IceHogs. Again, like I said at the start, if you're a season ticket holder, make sure you opt into those playoff packs by that April 17th deadline. Get a hold of Kevin, Tara, or Ryan. IceHogs have a home game coming up this next Saturday against Grand Rapids. That is our third and final local hat series giveaway. It's also our Gift of Hope night. We're going to try and promote organ donation at this game. If you're not an organ donor, look into how you can sign up, or you can come out to the BMO Center and learn more here at the BMO when we promote organ donation along with Gift of Hope. It's going to be a fun night on Saturday when the Griffins roll into town. Rockford with two big games here this weekend against GR, the team directly ahead of them in the standings. Thanks for tuning in to episode 13 of Hog Talk. We'll see you next time, and we'll see you right here at the BMO on Saturday.